Hi, it's Dr. Michael McNeil here. It's September the 17th, 2025, and I really wanted to catch up with everybody, but most specifically because, it's been a week to the day when Charlie Kirk, the American activist and founder of Turning Point USA, was actually assassinated. Assassination is a strong word because it it implies there was a political motive, and there very much was. And I think what was in the week that's followed, it's I think showed from the point of view of just of a philosopher and somebody that cares about discourse. One of the most famous things that Charlie, one of the things which he said was that when discourse ends, violence begins. And as a statement of, say, political philosophy, that is a remarkable, powerful thought. And I think it's just a powerful thought for anyone who's got any sort of commitment to the Socratic method of following an argument where it goes, or believing in rational discourse, of the exchange of views, of a way of settling differences. It's a really important cultural event, I think. Much as the assassination of Martin Luther King in the 1960s, Jeff Kennedy, it's for when people believe that they can revert to violence and violent assassination to settle political issues and to enforce an ideology or to impose an ideology. That's an issue, I think, of fundamental concern to anyone who's in, say, the thought space and in the philosophy space and the political space. So, and I think what's been most disturbing regarding this is that people have come out, because you've got to remember Charlie's only 31 years old, and he's got a wife and 2 young children, and there seemed to be a complete lack of empathy for his wife and for the children over the fact that their father was just assassinated. And and people, there's been lots of sort of like comment on that, because his children are going to grow up just reading about their father or watching their father. They're not going to experience their father. And even on that level of the human level, of the person level, we should have within our own hearts enough empathy. We might not have agreed with anything that Charlie said, but that's totally irrelevant. The idea that we are rejoicing and celebrating the death of a young man who believed in rational discourse and promoting discourse, and had devoted his life to having discussions for the very purpose of opening up and involving people in the idea of rational discourse, so that they can actually respect people, learn how to respect and learn how to argue, and learn how to act with other people in a rational way, in a rational mode of discourse, so that, as he says, that if you can discuss and you have that expectation that your discussion and your discourse is a way to solve problems, then it prevents you from lapsing into violence. Because the problem with violence is that once you cross that threshold of violence and of justifying violence to yourself, then suddenly everything, maybe not absolutely everything, but lots of things suddenly become an issue. And in the countries where violence has become a means, say within the Marxist tradition, the communist tradition, and you might say on the extreme right, fascist traditions and the Nazi traditions, violence then becomes just a way of everything becomes a matter of violence, and of, if you like, the Nietzschean idea of the imposition of power. That power is the thing that you impose on. Power is the thing that matters. That's what motivates people. Is this power, and all the trappings of democracy and of discussion and of philosophical exchange of ideas. One of the things Nietzsche said was that, the philosophers and people, they're just lawyers, arguing for a particular view that's been preset in advance. And that's a very, and that's a very dangerous sort of path to go along. And so we really need to consider very carefully, I think, that, how people jump to justifying violence, and how we, this political violence of this type, and how we need to be aware of the fallacious mode of argumentation that actually gets us there. Because once you cross that threshold, just like I've just said, suddenly everything becomes settlable by violence, and it's become, in what people call the Great A-woken-ing, this sort of what we call woke, or but in when I was younger it was called political correctness. This sort of it's rooted in Marxism. It's rooted in what's called critical theory, which is just Marxism, the Marxist idea of there's that all of society and all the social political interactions of society can all be understood in a scientific fashion. That's something to understand. Scientific socialism. This is what was one of the things that distinguished. What Lenin was saying was distinguishing, if you like, the Bolshevik mode of socialism from other what he called utopian modes of socialism. And Lenin refined the thought of Marx, because Marx believed that all interactions, and in this sense, Lenin kept this part, that the interactions of society, the power relations of society, were economic. And so you had the working class, and you had the owners of the factories, and the owners of the factories were in a power relationship of dominating the workers, and they were oppressing the workers. And if you like, the Marxist analysis was that the Lenin, I'll be more refined, because there is an interesting discussion. Marx said something during his life where he said, because of how his ideas had been taken, he'd actually said, I'm not a Marxist, because people had been picking up on certain threads within his ideas. And this is very true in the Leninist model, is that because Marx didn't necessarily believe that revolution was inevitable, whereas in Lenin said, yes, that revolution is inevitable. There's no way that it can be avoided. And the common 20th century sort of mode of communist, Marxist, communist, Trotskyite sort of like thought that's dominated the 20th century socialism, is extremely violent. There's no way of getting away from that. I think some estimates vary between depending how you count it, but there's over 100 million people that have died in the name of the Marxist brand of socialism, and it's all based on sort of like an oppressed narrative, and that the oppressed are justified by any means to throw off the change of their oppressors. With the famous Marxist frame, workers of the world unite, you have nothing to throw off but your chains. And so we have to understand why we've got to where we've got to, and because we don't want to be those who become so hard-hearted and indifferent that the cold-blooded assassination of somebody involved in an open debate is celebrated. I think that's the most disturbing aspect of this, is the idea that people can actually celebrate it. Now people are getting fired, but the astonishing thing is that it's teachers, lawyers, doctors, airplane pilots. There's all been these examples of these people who have been celebrating the death of someone just because they disagree with their politics and their ideology. And so it's something that, this in a sense is just the introduction. I'll try and keep these sort of to 10 minutes or something in there, but we really need to sort of like understand why we have got to where we've got to with this, and how we avoid it, because there's a fundamental what you might call cognitive dissonance, craziness. That's like a posh term for sort of like craziness, or that's justified, especially to say a younger generation of people, college age, what we would call university age students. US you would call it college age, people studying for degrees, and this remarkable callousness and coldness and justification of violence. So what I really want to talk about is what people might call this intersectionality, and how violence is justified, and to show how that is completely fallacious from a logical philosophical point of view, because the argument is a much broader argument about speech. Okay, so I will be back very shortly.